Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right. So welcome, Dr. Mya Fields to the Healing Homegirls. On my podcast, we talk about pretty much your testimony of where you're at in life and how you
Mhm.
got there and how you started that journey, and any tools you would like to share for um, educational purposes. I know you're
Yeah.
an educator. Anything on mental health or your pursuit just in life and your mission.
Okay. Absolutely. Do you want me to go ahead and jump in?
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah. So yeah, you can I'll probably edit that out. I'm just like, yeah, go. I'm just always I'm sorry, I'm very awkward. This is me
No
making
worries.
friends. My therapist suggested it. Yeah. Go you can go ahead and just start wherever you like and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me today, Jasmine. I'm excited to be here. Life is ultimately a journey, and I just hope that by sharing my story that I'm able to encourage others just to kind of give them that little extra boost to keep going because we're all in different stages. So I work primarily in higher education. I've been doing that a while, well over 10 years. So it's been really nice just to be able to connect with students and faculty members, and just really be able to have input on helping individuals ultimately reach their goals. It's really nice and fulfilling to have the opportunity to do that. So I've worked in admissions, student life, as an academic advisor, in career services, and now I actually work as an assistant dean. So I'm on the admin side of things. But it's still nice to be able to help shape some of the curriculum that students are involved with and ultimately the classes that they have to take to finish their degree. So, you know, I would say that my career has been very fulfilling and it's still continuing to go and, still juggling all the things like everyone else is. But I would probably say one of the toughest years of my life was in 2022. So the career is still going. I have two young boys. They're involved in all types of activities. So that's still going. I'm married. Me and my husband have been married 15 years next March. So that's still going. And for,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
I love that.
So just, there's a lot of irons in the fire, I'd say. But last year I had my daughter and she passed away. So ultimately, if anyone's ever been in like a train wreck type of situation, like we all have our different things. Mine was, my daughter Hannah, yours may be something else. But anytime you're in that like train wreck phase, it's like you want the world to just stop. But it keeps going. Like my children, like my boys, they're 4 and 6 now. So they were 3 and 5 at the time. They're still going, my husband, my job, everything is still going. Um, so it was and still is a tough process. And it's something that I will always be working through. And it's just something that I just kind of had to come to the realization of because I think just with my personality initially, I was like, okay, how do I fix this? How do I move forward? And it's just one of those things like, hey, this is going to be with you forever. And you just have to find a way to work through it. Like it's never not going to be a time that it's not sad because it is. Yeah. But you just find a way to function with it. So I would say if there's any parents who have lost a child, like reach out to your community, get all the support you need. Um, but know that like it's okay to have tough days. It's okay to be in the valley sometimes. Like, you don't always have to be on the mountaintop, and it's completely normal. It's like sometimes, if you go back to, you can just have days where it feels like it just happened.
Mhm.
That's just kind of how it goes. But that's just completely normal. So I would say that
Sorry, how old was, Hannah?
she passed away actually in the hospital
Mhm.
after I birthed her. So
Mm,
yeah, so it was
sorry.
a tough experience, I would say for sure. Um, but I do feel like I've been able to pivot to an extent to where it's kind of like, okay, how do I make
What
sure
was the
that,
next step?
yeah, like how do I make sure that there's meaning to her life outside of just her parents and
Mm,
her siblings because it's important. And so, I did start a podcast, called the Hey Hannah podcast, and it kind of came about as like through a counseling session, which is kind of funny. And my counselor was like, "Oh, you need to journal." And I'm like,
yeah.
that's not really my jam." And so I tried it,
Yeah.
and I got to the journal. I'm like, "Yep, just like I thought." From
Mhm.
what I remember, it's not my jam. But so I'm like, it's 2022. There has to be some other form of
Of journaling,
journaling.
right,
Yeah.
yes. I
I
tell
was
people
like,
all the time, you can record yourself, you can voice memo.
yeah,
That's literally why I started my podcast, and this was before therapy, and I was
yeah,
like, "I'm just using this as talk therapy for myself because I just feel like I'm oversharing with people, and, like, I almost felt like they weren't not because they confirmed, like, like, "Please share with me," but I
yeah,
felt like, you don't always wanna just talk about sad things, like, "I'm feeling this." I don't
yeah,
wanna be the, like, I don't wanna put people down because I'm going through this trauma. I wanna heal it, and how can I do it? And literally, I started a that's so crazy that, like, that alignment is there. Oh my gosh, wow.
yeah, absolutely. Well, look, there we go. There's a blessing in technology when
Yeah,
everyone says,
yeah,
like
I'm
all
like,
the
the day
bad
and age
stuff.
we're in.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really, a really cool benefit. And that's just really how the idea came about. And it was like, okay, well, long story short, we got to the podcast. But the premise behind it is like I'm having the conversations on the podcast that I thought I would have the opportunity to have with her.
Mm,
So, I mean, there's still information and knowledge going out there. And there's still like a created meaning, and I'm creating some happy memories around, when I think of her, and that's helpful.
yeah,
So it's been helpful in that way. And then I think it's just been a unique way for me to still be able to process everything that's going on, and I guess still like continue healing.
yes, yes. And, when is Hannah's birthday?
June 27th.
June, so this was June last year. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
so we well, her first birthday was not too long ago. I wasn't really sure how that was going to go. It was like at one
did you
point I was like,
prepare yourself?
I don't know if there's really a way to prepare yourself because you don't what I did do is I took the week off from
Good.
work because I just didn't really know what was coming.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the first birthday. So, in your mind, you always set up like, if this happens, I'm gonna do this.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then, when it happens, it's completely different. Like, what does Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
So, like, let me take the week off
That, yeah. Yeah.
and let me just like take it
Yeah.
as it comes. And my expectation level of myself was not too high. It was just kind of like, okay, you're gonna be sad and that's fine, but remind yourself like, don't get so low in a hole that you can't dig yourself out of it, type of deal.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
What did
yeah,
you
that
do
was
for that
definitely.
day?
So for that day, I looked at like some pictures, and I have like little memorabilia and stuff of her. Like they created a photo album for me at the hospital, and just kind of stuff like that. So I looked through like personal mementos, and I wasn't really sure. Like I didn't do the cake. thing. I just didn't really know how I felt about it.
Mhm.
But it was just a day kind of like of reflection, obviously heavy emotion, but you
Yeah.
know,
I have some clients that, lost a parent, and I have one that lost, her daughter, and I'm just like, on that day, just honor them in any way, adjust it how you see fit, how what's comfortable, what your spirit is calling, what's calming you, what's grounding you that day, even if it
yeah,
is lay in bed and cry, like, do that. So allow
yeah.
yourself to do these things. That's amazing that you're learning all this stuff. Is there on, what was I gonna ask? I'm sorry. On that, not on that day. Oh, on your podcast. I'm sorry. I had a question for your podcast. I usually have my journal, and my son ran out with it so I could write
No, no worries.
my questions. My ADHD gets to me. Um, but on that, on your podcast, you said you have conversations that you would have with her. So is it your just personal journal, or is it a mother daughter? Is it what?
So that's a good question. It's just a variety of topics. So, like for instance, I had a friend on who wrote a book and she's also a single mother. So she talked about just like, how she's been able to still push forward as a single mother and achieve her goals. And that's something that I would have wanted to encourage her to do. Like, hey, regardless of how tough life gets, I want you to be able to, roll with the punches. So, take this information in. Working as an educator, I've always had um, I guess I should say, I just carry around the idea that you can learn something from everybody. And
Mm,
so that's the premise. Well, I would say that's probably the primary thing with having different guests on. It's like, we hear their story. You don't have to come on and like bring a PowerPoint and a lesson plan.
yeah.
Just tell us your story,
Yes.
and we're going to connect with it as people, and we're going to learn from it. Like, you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. So, that's the idea behind when the guests are on. And then I have some weeks where it's just me and I talk about different things that I've just learned in my faith that I feel like I want her to know. Like, I would have wanted to teach her, like, how to pray, how, like, what are the promises of God, not just, I would want her to have some substance in her faith, because as life gets tough, that's what I've had to lean on
Really close.
heavily,
Yes.
yeah, to move forward. So I talked through some of those things. Um, but it's really early on. Week, let me see, episode 5 releases on Wednesday. So it's early. We'll see how it goes. I'm just happy, and I tell people all the time, like, my primary goal with the podcast was just like to get it out there and be able to, one, it's like a memory for
Yes.
her. Like, anytime I'm able to tell anybody about the podcast, I'm able to speak about her with a smile or in a positive way. Because as I said, she passed she didn't even get to come home. So, everything around it is just really like,
Yeah.
even as I talk about it, it's just it's sad. So you don't want to always think of your kid that way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But for a
I,
while, I mean, it's gonna be that way. Like you said, everyone that you have as a guest, and I always I say too, like, to my guests, I'm like, I know it's God ordained when we meet, because there's so much inherent wisdom that comes out through those pains. It's like, what was the lesson of you taking her, God? And to be able to praise him, I tell people that you need to allow yourself to be angry first. Like, he did take someone you love, it's crazy when I like people, like, when you really say be angry at God, but that's what he truly means, like, give it to him, not let the world take that and the devil trick you into something different. So it grew your faith, and I don't know you, but I'm so proud of you. Like,
oh, thanks.
um, what do you feel in growing your faith? Was your faith always the same, or it did, I'm sure it grew after that. What tools do you think has helped you along the way in your like spiritual health? Like, what grew you? What do you do outside of praying and journaling through your podcast?
um, So I would say I feel like my faith was pretty strong before.
Mm,
Um, I think my faith grew in different ways after his passing, maybe just like getting more clarity on biblical truth that's actually there. Cuz I think a lot of times we'll and it's I don't know, it's not really anyone's fault, but it's just like you can hear even around just like people lean heavily into cliches that aren't necessarily the promises of the Bible. And so, it can sometimes be portrayed that, God's gonna always heal and deliver in the way that we expect. And that's not really the case. No matter what you do, how much faith, how much you serve here on this earth, it doesn't take away the consequences that we live in because we're in a broken world. And
mm,
that's just a sad, sad truth. It's a hard truth and it's a sad truth. I mean, everyone is going to pass at some point. I feel like premature death is extremely hard because it hits you out of nowhere. Like you don't see it coming. But I think sometimes we forget about what it means to live in a broken world. Like
yeah,
it wasn't supposed to be like this, but it's how it is. And you can have all the faith in the world. It's still the circumstances that we're in. And so I think when you come to that realization, um, it just kind of helps you to continue to move forward and give you kind of that support you need. And also, the most growth we have comes from challenges and different situations. We often, just as human beings, what we do, we try to avoid conflict, we try to avoid
yeah.
problems, we
Yeah,
try to
you have
avoid
to get uncomfortable to heal. I tell people all that, like, it's
yeah.
healing is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and it's lifelong, like, something will come up that
Oh
you have to
yeah,
heal. You don't just become healed. Healing is a forever this is gonna be a
for sure,
forever journey, yes, like,
for sure.
wow.
I completely agree.
Did your boys know what was happening? I know they were, like, 3 and 5, but did they
So they knew obviously that I was pregnant because she was full term. So
Yeah.
I mean they knew that, but they don't know like, oh, she passed away and all this kind of because for one, I didn't want, and I don't know, I'm not saying this is right. This is just my way. I don't know what the right way is.
Yeah,
I
you're
didn't want them to have that level of trauma at 3 and 5.
yeah, of course.
That was probably the hardest loss I've dealt with, and I'm well into adulthood. And so for them, I'm like, you know,
Still have to wear that hat. It's
yeah,
you have to give
it's
them
rough. So they don't know the extent to of everything. So
that's that's amazing. Most people don't protect their kids like I remember like the first death I experienced in my childhood, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, he died," and I'm just like, like that leaves a level of trauma that through life
yeah,
go back and grieve properly because I don't think people are taught how to grieve. No one really knows until it
no,
happens. So it's really unexpected for them. So I don't blame anybody at all for that. It's just I think we don't talk about grief enough, how to
for
go through
sure.
the right way. It's different for everyone, but to talk about it more and kind of get, like you said, little what's for you take and what's not leave, but like journaling and prayer. Those are the only that got me through healing all my traumas. Just
For
those two
sure.
right there and adjusting them. Some weeks were just journaling and I would pray just inwardly.
Yeah,
Some weeks I was on the floor, my head, my forehead to the floor praying and no journaling. So
yeah.
to adjust that. Is there any other tools that you've learned along the way beside podcast and faith and prayer?
I would probably say my faith has been like the strongest tool that I've used just to kind of navigate things. But I've leaned more into community, which has been helpful in some ways. I'm not I'm not one that's like immersed in a grief community. So for anyone listening, take it as you will. If that's your jam, great. But if you feel like, oh, I'm not completely in like a sharing group, that's fine too. Because I feel like I'm at the place now with groups that I can't carry everybody's burden right now because I don't really have mine tucked away in a bag that good, you know? So it's kind of
I
like,
get it.
my stuff's kind of falling out a little bit on the way, and then you pile yours in too. Like we all dropping stuff.
Yeah.
So, that's just not where I'm at with it. But I do like the pieces that I can take, like, hey, I learned that, I picked that up. Like you just said something to me that was just kind of like an aha moment. We don't talk about grief enough. And I'm going to dig into that more because I always chew on things later. But you're absolutely right. We all grieve, not only, I think sometimes like when you hear grief, you just automatically think people, but you grieve
Mhm.
so many different things. You grieve the loss of your job. If
Yeah.
you're a mother who had a career and then you decided to be a stay at home mom because you have children, you grieve the loss
A
of that.
stay-at-home mom that have children, and I grieve that so much that it brought, like, toxicity into my relationship where I'm like, "Oh, I'm always home, but when I really settled,
Yeah.
like I said, into faith, I'm like, "What is God trying to teach me?" Like, it's not that I don't like, my husband's like, "You can work, I'm just trying to, like, make you less stressed because we have a lot of children," you know?
Yeah.
And when I really took it and stopped being defensive about it, I'm like, "I have time to do this, I have time to journal." It's a level of freedom you get with, not having to be in that, like, survival mechanism. I have to clock in, I have to like,
Yeah.
that's how I felt. And people also think grief is just for death. Like, you can grieve people while
Yeah.
you're alive. When you go no in this journey, setting boundaries, going no contact with people, that is the hardest decision every day to wake up and not call, like, this family
Yeah.
member. If you're grieving, I had to literally when I went through my grief stage, I did the Daniel fast because I was no contact with my mom, but I went back contact and then it didn't work. And I'm like, this
Yeah.
is why I have to go non because it's a distraction. It it hurts me more than grows me, and it sucks because I'm like, you always want that. But I know that back then they didn't have the resources we had, like you said, internet.
Yeah.
That it was not popping like it is now. Like we can literally get an education. I literally got a specialization from Penn State certification
Uh-huh.
online, like
Yeah.
online on my pace, just to be trauma informed, to come on here and be safe
Yeah.
for people, to make them feel safe. And be because it's a responsibility also
Yeah.
talking about these things. But grieving people while they're alive, that
That's hard.
is yes, it's a journey. It's like people are like, "Oh, you don't, you should, your mom, it's not promised tomorrow." And it's like, I know, but when you have your own individual relationship with God and he's telling you these things, he's above her. It's
Yeah.
above me. One day, if it comes back around, I will be ready. And I have forgiven her. That's the thing
Yeah.
that it's a bitter thing to go no contact. It's not. It's just going through a grief of adjusting your boundaries and you filling your cup with emotional safety so you can express these emotions and come on
Yeah.
here and talk to like-minded women like you and other women I've had on the podcast, amazing women. This is this has been such an alignment. Is there anything else you would like to share about your journey? If you're safe enough, I am curious. Um, how did she pass? Is there anything you would like to share with other mothers about that process when you are in the hospital and they tell you like I know like my son had jaundice and I didn't even know like what that was, but they were coming back. They had told me that process with the nurse and the doctor and the counselor. So I
Yeah.
kind of that with just sharing like if your child has jaundice is not bad and we had to go to the like hospital, the children's hospital where there was actual children
Yeah.
in wagons with cancer and literally I went on the elevator and I was alone and I fell on my knees and start praying like thank God that this is the only thing my son had
Yeah.
because not many people are yeah
Yeah. So there was obviously the opportunity to do an autopsy and different testing and genetic testing and all this type of thing to figure out like, hey, let's get some answers. But when I started thinking about it, I don't know how healthy that would have been for me because the truth of the matter is she was still gone. So do I spend my time wrapped it like I get the test back and then the next thing it's like, well, who did this? And we got to find out who's responsible because it has to be someone. It's like it would have been a never ending thing. And I think for my sanity, it was like
Yeah.
she's still gone. I think one thing I learned, amongst many things, is it definitely was a highlight to how little control you have sometimes.
Yeah.
And I still like, I would have gotten the results back and still had I couldn't bring her back.
Yeah.
So I
That's
just feel like emotionally, it would have just been like way too draining
yeah.
to dig into it. And I haven't regretted that decision because, again, I don't feel like there's anything.
More.
Yeah.
That- yeah. Wow. That's that's honestly bravery because many people afterward I've noticed will spend time like, why? What happened?
Yeah.
When? Let's do this. Let's dig up the body. Like they get like such, and I'm just like, they're on the other side of heaven. Like we just have to make the best of our lives here and
Yeah.
value and honor them in some way. And you honored her with the whole show. That's
Well, thank you.
amazing. That is amazing. Starting a podcast and talking about these things are hard. It's really
Yeah,
hard. And
it
I hope
is. It is hard, but it's a process. We're living things, and every living thing is supposed to always be growing. So I do feel like it's a continued avenue of growth for me. So I'm thankful for that.
when you are out and thoughts come up of her, um, what are some tools that you use that are like quick that might help other women when grief does come up and you're like in the grocery store and that comes up? Like what things help you come back grounded?
So one of the ladies that I worked with, and I found a few counselors because you got to find the right fit. Like, don't just go with the first.
Yes.
But
I tell people that all the time. If you don't like it, I went through 5 counselors.
yeah, like
So, like,
find
you
the right
just
fit.
say no, yeah, like, don't sit because then it's just a waste of your time, it's a waste of their time, it's a waste of the
Yeah.
girl. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. But, this lady, she was helpful in this way. Her mom passed, suddenly, and so one of the things that she told me that she does, which is absolutely fine, a good way that she used to kinda work through things, she said she tells herself, like, if she has an overwhelming moment, like, "Okay, you have 3 hours until you get home. Hold
Mhm,
it together or until you get in your car." Hold
mhm.
it together, just hold it together till we can get to the car. And then when you get in the car,
Yeah,
let it go. Don't hold it forever. You have to
yeah,
give yourself a time to release. But she was just, she was very helpful in that way. I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, just, you got an hour, look at my clock if it's the time, or if I'm in the store, how far is the bathroom? Like, can I just
mm,
hold it together? And it's not that you don't want to see other people to see you express yourself. But I think it's important to remember only share that type or that part of your story with people who deserve to know it. Because
mm,
everybody's not going to handle you with care. And you're going to get those silly comments like, this God needed another angel. No, he didn't. It's those types of,
no, you
you
didn't.
those
Yeah,
comments, it can just kind of like, you're already grieving, you're already mad, all kinds of stuff. And it's just like, what'd you just say to me?
yeah.
So
Yeah, I learn in those situations too. That's a good point, is to just stay silent and listen.
yeah.
If you have questions to ask that may be helpful, but to give that like unwanted advice until you go through those things. Like I have never lost a child, but I've had an ectopic pregnancy, but I think that's way different than actually giving birth to a child like that. And that's what I do believe God doesn't give us more than we can handle, because I that would break me. So I know that your mission is powerful for you to have gone through that. there's no other there's no other reasoning, you know. It's you are on a mission and you're doing that now. You're living in that moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a lot. That is a lot. Have you how were your parents through the situation? I know as you're grieving, how was your support system um
They
in your
were really great. I had a great support system. You know, my mom, my sister, they were at the hospital and, you know, they held her and they still did like pictures, you know, so they were there. They were always so supportive. And, you know, they were grieving in their own ways too, because there was a lot of loss there. I had friends who were just so supportive. I remember I had one friend who came up, and I always think about this when I think about her because it's just like absolutely amazing that she did this. And so she once Hannah passed, they put her in like a kind of like a bassinet, just like they roll your baby in the room, but they put like a cooling pad so
Mhm.
you can stay with the baby as long as you like. And so she's sitting, like the baby is sitting there. My friend is sitting there, and we're just like having a conversation for hours. Like, and she never like made a big deal about it. It was just kind of like we were talking and just laughing. And I can tell like she was trying to have conversation to, you know, kind of lighten the moment as much as you can. Cause there's not really much you can do.
Yeah.
But I appreciated her in that moment because I know it had to be like super awkward for her. We're sitting there with a newborn that's not alive and
Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry.
so I'm always thankful to
Yeah.
her for that. Like she didn't like blink. She just we chatted like our regular conversation and she stayed for hours and she literally drove up like 4 hours just to come.
Just to give you this core memory that helps.
Yeah.
You always
So,
need
yeah, I'm so thankful for her for that. And I'll say this, I am now I'm crying.
it's
Yeah.
okay. I always say allow yourself to cry. This is something to cry about. That's not
For sure. Um, I am like naturally more of an introvert.
yeah.
And so sometimes if you are more of an introvert, it's like your default, like when really bad stuff happens, like, oh, well, they know I'm an introvert, you know, so they know I'm not going to, you know, but you have to fight to get out of your comfort zone to still show up and support people in hard ways. I know that was not easy for her. She doesn't even have children, you know, but she did it because she wanted to support me. And so I try to make sure that even if it's uncomfortable, you know, a lot of times even, you know, you'll see people grieving just on social media and you're like, oh, I don't know what to say, so I won't say nothing.
Yeah. I
I
always say
like,
hugs because I'm like, if you know me, I'm truly hugging you right now.
yeah.
Like,
And so I say to myself now, like, just say something like it doesn't have to be a fix. Nothing you can say can fix it, but it just shows some support, you know, in some type of way. So I always push myself like, I know the situation is uncomfortable, but you have to support people in hard ways too. So, but yeah, I absolutely, man, I always love her for that because that she showed up big for sure.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. It you always need that. That's making me miss my friend in Florida. Like that's what she did during those hard times of just being a single mom and having
Yeah.
to take my son to work. And she was just like showing up just out of the blue, like, I'll take him and like he has those memories, like those are core memories for him of going to like the water
Oh,
park, like she spoiled him, and I always think of that. It's like you need that one,
I
just
love
one
that.
just one good person to leave that core memory for you that you can look back on. And we don't even talk today, which is, crazy thinking about this now. It's like I need to call her. You need to I always tell people value the people while they're here.
Yeah.
Those people. And I honestly, like, sitting here thinking about it, I don't think I did enough of that. But, we go through our own things. It's like
Yeah.
you kind of have to be selfish in those moments because you deserve to be.
Yeah.
How long did you stay with her, with Hannah?
It was about, I want to say 3 days.
Days.
Mm. No, it's 3 days.
And so you actually sleep in the room and wake up and be with her?
So I could, but I ended up, they took her away for a while and then they brought her back on the last day. So there was the option to hold and, do whatever. I think at the time, it's probably one of the things that I wish I would have done more. I don't know, your mind's really cloudy when stuff like that happens. I don't think I took enough pictures because I was so stuck on the more I hang on to her, the harder it's going to be to still put the pieces back together because I couldn't just stop life at that point. There was so much more that still had to go on. So I felt like, oh, if I'm holding her more, I'm doing all these pictures and all this, it's just going to make it harder. And that probably is true. It may have, but I do wish I would have taken more pictures because at the time, like, oh, I didn't want to see them. But there will be a day that I'm sure I will, and I have some, but that I'm sure I will want to see them more. So it's hard to kind of dig deep and think about, a brighter day when you're kind of in the dumps. But that's something like if anybody's in that situation and you have the strength, like, to muster it up, you may think like, oh, I don't want to do it now. You'll want it later.
Mm. Yeah, that is a strong, that's some wisdom right there, because not many people can admit that. Like, I wish I would have, those are the things that will
Yeah.
help. Yeah. Um, I actually met a girl on Facebook, like you said, joining groups. So
Mhm.
I'd say like whatever your healing journey starts with, or whatever you have to go and relive. For me, that was that mother wound, and God's humor in that. It was like I had my podcast at first, Dear Mama, Hi Daddy, because I was like, they're the source of my trauma, and I was like, they are, they still are, yeah. But I prayed about it, and God literally was like, no, you're gonna have a bunch of homegirls, like, as you heal your mother wound, because I was like that. I just viewed every female relationship as just like toxic. That made me the introvert. I didn't want to meet women. And as I'm meeting all these women, I'm like, it's not that. Like, everybody's just so welcoming and has the wisdom, to share. And I changed the podcast to this, and I've been able to meet so many amazing women, and I joined so many Facebook groups. Like, if you're
Yeah.
if you're an introvert like me, that's like the only option. I don't want to like show up physically to groups.
Yeah.
Because I would straight up be like, like, I get some anxiety. Like, I am just a weird person. And so, but I've honed into my awareness. But I joined Facebook group, and this Facebook group of just what group did I meet her? I think it was like a married group. So everything I did, like, married, I did like narcissistic mothers. I just started my lock journey. So I
Yeah.
did locked and loaded. I just finding those communities and being
Yeah.
active with commenting and sharing these things, because it helps people. And I met this woman, Alexis. She went through the same thing as you. She lost her daughter last year, and she's pregnant this year, due in November. And it's a blessing that, like, you meet these women because she's having this baby, and I had this LV pump that she was on her like Amazon, for the
Yeah.
baby. I sent it to her, and it just made her just,
Oh,
yes. And
I
I just,
love that.
And so I was like, "You get to walk around," and I genuinely didn't want her to stress this pregnancy and, like, after and just, she went through that hard loss too, and I think her baby girl passed, after going home and coming back, and so,
Oh,
like, these deep wounds that we have as mothers have to carry, um, I just am in awe of how you guys keep going because I have 3 boys, and when they had jaundice, like I said, like, just seeing them in the hospital, like, that was hard for me, that broke me, you know?
yeah.
So, again, your mission is strong and stay to it and keep healing because you're truly I mean, this is gonna help so many women, your podcast is gonna help so many grieving mothers.
Thank
Like,
you.
you can't stop that. You can't like, as we speak, I'm going to share that with Alexis, like, now it's like a going you have to do these things, so I'm proud of you for knowing your mission and
Thank
here
you.
in your faith. Um, I'm sorry. That's why I'm an introvert. I'm a crier. Um,
No worries at all.
how did your husband? I always am curious of how like the man grieves because they're kind of so they're not emotionalists, but they feel like they have to hold a certain like stature during.
Yeah, I think, he obviously um has grieved and is continuing to grieve as well, but I obviously we do grieve differently. He went back to work um like a few weeks after. So I think it was just more of kind of like an avoidance type thing. Um I think, in that time, one of the things he told me is like it's so hard from his perspective. Um, just as a man feeling like I'm supposed to protect my family and I can't do anything for two of the most important women in my life. Like there's nothing I can do. And so, it's a continued process. I know for him, he's a lot more of an extrovert. So he connected, just with a lot more people just to kind of share how he's feeling. And it was just so ironic. He met like at least 2 to 3 men who'd been through a similar situation. And they were much further down the line, but they were able to understand, specifically where he was coming from and then also still offer that unique form of support. So that's been and I think continues to be very helpful for him. So it's just and he is a journaler. So he actually for our
Wow,
oldest
I met a man that loves to journal.
oh yeah, that he is.
Really?
So for our oldest son, the entire time I was pregnant, he wrote a journal to him during the entire pregnancy. And so, see, look, I'll cry for that too. I'll cry for it.
Yeah, girl, cry. This is yeah.
But well, this is a good cry. But yeah,
Yeah.
so the entire pregnancy, he journaled to him, just like letters to his son. So he still continues to journal, but that's a form of coping with things for him.
I how do you find these groups? How did you was it like resources that the hospital gave you, or is it just resources you looked up on your own? Just
So
so
the
everyone in your
Yeah,
community.
so the hospital gave me resources, which was good, just like different groups that met at the hospital. Um, Oddly enough, you get resources from the funeral home. So they, did things and they send like they can help you with like grief communication, just like encouragement they'll send and stuff like that. So they give groups. Um, One thing for me, since I said I mentioned that I am a Christ follower, I dug into my church. Like, what does the church have? Because I think there was I felt like I was going through like a faith crisis. And
Mm.
I didn't need someone who didn't understand my faith perspective to inform kind of my thinking at that point. Not that it's bad, but I feel like I already was like, what is going on here? So I don't need you to come in and give me an amen. I needed like,
Oh, right. I know that's
yeah,
right.
I was looking for clarity with things. So I dug into resources with my church. Like one of the things I mentioned earlier is like finding the right counselor, therapist. That was something as I was specifically looking through, like, I need them to be
Mm,
I need them to be a person of faith. And this lady that I found now, like, oh my goodness, I feel like she is a godsend because I mean, I learned so much from her all the time. But one thing I specifically looked for, she has a degree in ministry.
mm,
So it's
yeah.
very important for me for just the way my brain works, like the fluff statements, like I mentioned, God needs another angel. He doesn't. Where's the scripture at? And that's what I want to talk about. But she's like, she can support that information and like tell me where to look. And so it's very helpful in that way just to kind of get some clarity on things. And she's amazing. Like
Yeah.
she's definitely a gift.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, that's you always find that one therapist where you're just like, you need that like life coach. You need that person that's like holding your hand through this, like
Yeah.
that's your person. So you found that. That's amazing. I found mine, but she like left me. She just she said, I don't need therapy anymore and to let people just experience you. And so I've been stepping out and doing that, but I'm like, I miss her. Why did she say that? Like you always go back to that. And like some people that I guess that I've had on here say with therapy, some of their wisdom, sometimes you need a break from it and then
Yeah.
to come back to it so you adjust those as well. And that is a tool, like other people becoming resources for your own life. That's another tool added with journaling, prayer, walk. I tell people walk, learn to breathe again because people take we're in the survival mechanism. And the first thing I do with my clients in my mindfulness coaching, I'm like, let's practice breathing. And they're like really fast every time. And I'm like, did you forget how to breathe? Like breathe like deepest breath of your day, like fill up your lungs, like do
Yeah,
3 of those when you wake up and just go with your day, go with the flow of that's all you can do. Like you said, just move forward.
for sure.
I always like to end with just something like a quote of yours or a personal saying or just something that you repeat in your head that keeps you going. Would you like to share that with other women? Do you have like a specific one that you say all the time that helps you through these things?
Um, let's see. One that I say all the time that kind of helps me through things. I say this one. I don't know how profound it is. Um,
It will be to
but
somebody.
whenever things get really tough, you have to remember that God is good.
Mm. All the time. Yes.
So, I mean, it's just helpful for me, like when I can't understand it, when it's like, I don't see a purpose in this. I have to remember God is good. And when you know that that's your core, that's your foundation, that's what you're building off of, then that means what he is allowing is for your good. These situations are going to work for your good. I don't understand it, just like, my first grader doesn't understand when I try to tell him to do stuff, but like I've been here, I've been around the block, you know, I have to keep in mind like God can see things that I am not aware of. And I know that's his character. He's good. So I have to trust that. I have to lean into that. So
Mm.
that's my reminder to myself when I need to just settle it down a little bit. So hopefully that helps somebody.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. I'm gonna end this recording.